That was the amazing Israeli Iron Dome system in action, intercepting Hamas rockets in the sky. As you by now know, violence has erupted in the Middle East, and in response to the constant rocket attacks from Hamas, Israel has launched massive airstrikes on Gaza. Here to update us on the latest from Israel is David Siegel, Consul General of Israel in Los Angeles, where he serves as the senior representative of the State of Israel to the southwestern United States. Most recently, Mr. Siegel served as Chief of Staff to Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister, Danny Ayalon. Welcome again, David, to PJTV.
Thank you, Roger.
Let's look at this situation. It's pretty grim at the moment. These Iron Dome system that we've just been watching is one of the most brilliant technologies probably in the history of war, but how effective can it be in the long run?
Well, it's a brilliant technology. It's the first of its kind in the world, and we're seeing it in action. There's a 90% interdiction rate success. So if Hamas and Jihad have fired 1,000 rockets at Israel this week, 300 of them were taken out of the sky by Iron Dome, and only 30 to 40 have actually hit residential areas. So you see that 300 rockets would have hit those residential areas without it. Tel Aviv, this is the 5th battery, fully funded by the United States. The technology is Israeli, but fully funded by the United States, was raced to Tel Aviv 4 hours before those rockets that you just shown were fired over the city, and it immediately went into action and took them out. So the system is very effective, but we only have 5, and it covers our south and Tel Aviv. We need 13 batteries to cover the entire country, and the batteries are very expensive.
And how many missiles are out there if you count Hamas and Hezbollah? I've heard the figure with Hezbollah of 80,000 missiles. Does that make sense? Is that
unfortunately, this is where we are. There are around 12,000 in Gaza right now. There are 80,000 in Lebanon. Altogether, there are around 200,000 rockets, facing Israel from the different fronts of the Middle East.
You think 13 Iron Domes are going to handle that? I don't know. It's scary.
Well, if you look at the way Iron Dome is performing right now, it really is an incredible system. But again, no system is perfect, and there is a 10% chance that these rockets will fall on civilian areas, and this is where we're seeing all the death and destruction right now.
Well, all right, let's move on to what we are in. Absolutely, it seems, is a propaganda war of sorts. You have Hamas, which is is a militarized state, but not an advanced technical state, facing an advanced technical state, and using that essentially to manipulate public opinion. How well do you think Hamas is doing this time around?
Well, whenever we have this kind of a skirmish with terror groups, and this time it's very intense and very serious because it's reaching Jerusalem, it's reaching Tel Aviv, there's a whole cottage industry of apologists that come out and say, well, they're frustrated, or well, they're under occupation, or well, they're this, and well, they're that. So we're seeing a lot of that, and we're also seeing a lot of false stories, stories that are being retracted by mainstream media right now as we speak, which is very important. They're showing footage from Syria instead of from Palestinian areas. Some of these rockets that they're firing at us, 100 of them have fallen inside Gaza on their own communities. So who knows what they're using and the pictures they're showing on television. So it's very serious, and I got to tell you that pajama medias and the kind of outlets like you guys, you're the Iron Dome of the online world, and you can interdict these stories, you can investigate these stories and expose them for what they are.
Yes, but it takes us time, frankly, because these things happen in real time. And what's interesting to me about, for example, CNN just retracted, evidently, the story of that supposed dead body in Gaza that the guy was walking around 5 minutes later.
Right.
Now, but what's interesting about this is that I don't know how long now it is back to the Al-Dura case, which was the first of those Hollywood productions that was debunked. But that's been a decade at least, isn't it? And still, the mainstream media hasn't gotten the message that that's what's going on.
Well, it's very important to convey that, because part of what Hamas does is it broadcasts to its own public all of these pictures, so it keeps their morale high. Right. They're also saying that they've downed our planes, that they've fired at our Knesset, that they've downed helicopters, that they're constantly attacking Tel Aviv. So this is part of their war, their propaganda campaign for their own public as well and for the Middle East. if we have any chance of stopping this rocket fire and forcing them into some sort of long-term arrangement where no more rockets are fired at Israel's population, and right now we have 5 million people on bomb shelters. If we have any chance of doing that, we've got to fight every single false picture, every single false propaganda, because it's making this thing continue.
Now, the actual beginning of the present situation was announced on Twitter, wasn't it, really? For the first time maybe in the history of armed conflict.
Yeah, this is a very intensive social media war as well, and battlefront. And again, we need all the help that we can get. Right now, the United States is squarely behind Israel, and it's been truly extraordinary to see the Senate and the House and the White House all come out unequivocally in Israel's favor. But you know, this campaign could get a lot uglier and more violent and more complicated, and we need to make sure that the American public is getting the correct, realistic picture of what's really happening.
Speaking of the picture, there's been a change, demographic change in the Middle East, of course, with Egypt and Turkey, formerly quasi-allies of Israel, now with Islamist governments. How does this change the equation here?
Well, Turkey is one thing, and they're making some very unhelpful statements publicly, as usual. The Egyptians, we hope, will continue to play that constructive role behind the scenes in helping broker some sort of long-term arrangement so that we can restore peace in this part, or security in this part of the world, and certainly in our country. So we're watching, we're working with the United States, we're working with other allies to pressure the countries in the region, to put the pressure on these terror groups to stop the fire, and then to agree to terms that will deal both with the smuggling of these arms and the firing in the future, that all of this come to an end.
It's interesting, because the role of new Egyptian President Morsi, who is a Muslim Brotherhood guy and a graduate of USC, in terms of local news, is he playing a double game? What really is going on? I know you're in a diplomatic situation, but I mean, historically, Arab leaders say one thing for the public and one thing behind the door. What's going on here?
So we are watching what he does and what Egypt does, and not what Egypt says. So yes, there's a lot of rhetoric out there all the time for all sorts of reasons, including domestic consumption. We note that, but we're really watching. What really is important right now is, do they move to stop the violence and to set in place a mechanism that we can actually live with in the future and agree to? And this is where Egypt does play an important role, and the United States plays an important role in having that kind of influence on Egypt and other countries in the region.
Now, Israel has been criticized in the past for not being as good at the propaganda war as they are in the armed war. I sense, even throwing you a bouquet since you threw one to us, your presence is an indication they're paying more attention to that. But how do you evaluate that right now? What is the status of Israeli, let's put it on, as propaganda?
Well, I think there's a few things that we need to convey to the world. Most people, most Americans that are looking at the story just woke up to it, don't know the context, see Israel in Gaza again, see these headlines of Israel attacking Gaza, quote unquote. They don't know that this year, 2012, there have been 800 rockets fired at Israeli civilian communities. Each one of those rockets is a war crime in itself. And they're being fired from Palestinian civilian communities by these terrorists that, they're all hiding underground right now. It's very hard to reach them. They leave their population up on the top, and they have these rocket launchers, and they're all set on remote control. And it's a great way to conduct a war. Have your citizens up front, and you hide behind them. This is how the Hamas does it. So we need to expose that, and we need to continue to hammer home the fact that there's no moral equivalence here between a state like Israel defending its civilian population from these incoming missiles, and a terror group that just doesn't care about its own population, certainly doesn't care about our civilian population. All they try to do is terrorize Jerusalem, terrorize Tel Aviv. That rocket they fired at Jerusalem on the eve of Shabbat, this Friday, on the Sabbath, on the eve of Sabbath. That rocket actually landed in the West Bank, right next to a Palestinian village, and blew out the windows of Palestinian homes there. They don't care about this. They don't care about their own people. If they cared about the people of Gaza, believe me, Roger, they wouldn't be spending all their money on this infrastructure underground that they can hide in, or on these 12,000 rockets. You know what? Maybe they'd build schools. Maybe they'd build hospitals. How revolutionary is that? So this is the kind of things that I think we need to communicate, and we need to make sure that people understand.
Absolutely, but how do you deal with the perception that Israel, which is now a very successful modern state with research institutes from Apple and Intel all around Haifa, you know, one of the world leaders in technology, against these people who are pretending to be fedayeen and poor people. I mean, because that's the image that is being projected, as you know, in the media and swallowed alive by the Western media. I mean, that's what it's much simpler than what you're saying almost, even though what you're saying is true.
Well, I think, you know, if you judge it by the results up until now, the United States is squarely behind Israel. The Obama administration is squarely behind Israel. The president said something amazing yesterday where he said that no nation on earth would tolerate missiles raining down on its own population this way. And we know that in the United States, one rocket, just one, from a neighboring country would cause a major outcry here, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion right now. Well, so all right, so we've had 1,000 of those in a week, and we're a little smaller than America. So, you know, the challenges are clear. Challenges are very clear. And we have to make sure that we keep hammering home the fact that even though they're quote-unquote weak, they have 12,000 rockets, and they're sent from Iran. They're very serious systems. They're deeply dug in the ground. They're willing to endanger their own population. And we're not willing to endanger their population, so that we're doing this with a hand tied behind our back, if not two. You know, I don't know if you've seen the story of a F-16 pilot that's identified one of these Fajr 5 rockets from Iran, targeting Tel Aviv. He was about to take out that target, and then he saw kids in the vicinity of this missile launching site, so he pulled back. That rocket was fired at Tel Aviv, interdicted by the Iron Dome. But, you know, so this is what we're facing. So, of course, we're a big technologically advanced country, but we also have to be aware of the fact that we can't just, you know, go in and indiscriminately bombard Gaza. We're trying to be surgical. We're trying to make sure that the world understands that this is a just cause, that we're being very measured, but we need to find a way to bring an end to this as quickly as possible.
How do we at PJTV counter people at CNN when they don't retract, when they quickly buy the images that Anderson Cooper bought a couple of days ago and then finally realized was a lie, which he should have realized in the beginning? That's the...
Well, there are two kinds of pictures, Roger. One is false, and then that should be exposed. And if a picture is true, and there will be civilian casualties, you know, there's no nation on earth, no army in the world that can do it in such a surgical way that absolutely no civilian is harmed, especially when they purposely place the stuff in people's homes and mosques and, you know, in schools and community centers, hospitals. So it's very difficult to root this out without harming civilians. We're doing the best that we can. So if the picture is real, I think we can't shy away. You need to explain. These guys are using their public as human shields. This is not Mother Teresa. I mean, Hamas is genocidal. Their charter calls for the destruction of the state of Israel and Jews around the world. Everybody. This is an extremist group. The world recognizes it as a terror organization. If they want to unterrorize themselves and become a normal actor, not a terrorist group, we're sitting there waiting to negotiate in the future, if need be. But they have to comply with the world demands. They have to agree to negotiate. They have to stop the violence. They have to stop, you know, the terrorism. It's basic things that they need to do that any other country would require.
Well, thanks a lot, David Siegel, for updating us on this situation.
Always,
we'll
Roger.
Stay in touch. This has been Roger Simon for PJTV. Thank you very much.